What if I told you that the secret to becoming wealthy has nothing to do with how smart you are and everything to do with how you behave? That might sound strange, but consider this shocking contrast. Ronald Read was a janitor who drove a second-hand car, wore old flannel shirts, and used safety pins to keep his coat together. Yet when he died at 92, he left behind $8 million from quietly investing in blue-chip stocks for decades. Meanwhile, Richard Fuscone was a Harvard-educated investment banker who lived in a massive mansion with 2 swimming pools and a 7-car garage. At his career peak, he retired early in luxury. But during the 2008 crisis, he lost everything. Bankruptcy, foreclosure, gone. How did the janitor become a millionaire while the executive went broke? The answer reveals everything about why success with money is not a science. It's a behavior. Most people focus on tactics and strategies, but the real game is psychology. In this video, I reveal 5 psychological truths about money that separate those who build lasting wealth from those who stay broke forever. Lesson number 5. It's the most humbling truth that even the smartest people ignore until it's too late. Before we dive into the first one, hit subscribe, turn on notifications so you don't miss any videos, and comment psychology, along with your biggest money mindset challenge. Thank you so much, and now we're getting started. Lesson 1. The trap of never enough. The first psychological truth that destroys more wealth than any market crash is the trap of never enough. As Morgan Housel puts it, the hardest financial skill is getting the goalpost to stop moving. Studies show that most people believe they need 2 to 3 times their current income to feel rich. But here's the devastating reality. That gap never closes unless you consciously close it yourself. In the towering mountain ranges, where ambitious climbers sought to prove their worth through conquest of ever higher peaks, there lived a determined mountaineer who had dedicated his entire life to the pursuit of reaching summits that would finally satisfy his restless spirit. This climber, known as the Endless Peak Seeker, possessed exceptional skills, quality equipment, and unwavering determination that had already carried him to remarkable heights. The Endless Peak Seeker began his journey with a modest but meaningful goal: to reach the highest mountain in his local region. After months of training and preparation, he successfully summited that peak and experienced the profound satisfaction of achievement. However, as he stood on top, celebrating his victory, something unexpected happened that would change the course of his entire life. From his elevated position, the Endless Peak Seeker could see distant mountain ranges with peaks that towered even higher than the one he had just conquered. Instead of savoring his hard-earned accomplishment, his mind immediately shifted to these new challenges. The summit beneath his feet, which had seemed so important just moments before, suddenly felt insignificant compared to the grander possibilities stretching across the horizon. Without allowing himself time to rest, celebrate, or appreciate what he had achieved, the Endless Peak Seeker immediately began planning his next expedition. When he successfully conquered that higher mountain, the pattern repeated itself. Each summit revealed even more distant peaks that dwarfed his current achievement, creating an endless cycle of striving that consumed all his energy and resources. Years passed, and the Endless Peak Seeker became known throughout the region for his remarkable climbing achievements. He had reached heights that most people could only dream of, accumulated impressive equipment, and earned respect from fellow climbers. Yet he felt increasingly empty and restless because no summit ever provided the lasting satisfaction he sought. Meanwhile, other climbers who had reached more modest peaks were living with deep contentment and joy. They would spend time on their summits appreciating the views, sharing meals with fellow climbers, and reflecting on their journey. These climbers understood something profound that the Endless Peak Seeker had missed. The value of a summit isn't determined by what lies beyond it, but by the effort required to reach it and the wisdom to appreciate the achievement. Here's what that story reveals about money psychology. Rajat Gupta rose from poverty in India to become head of McKinsey with over $100 million in net worth. but it wasn't enough. He committed insider trading and lost everything: reputation, wealth, freedom, because he couldn't stop climbing. The most dangerous phrase in finance is just a little bit more. Define your own version of enough, not society's or Instagram's, and when you reach it, stop. Because there's no reason to risk what you have and need for what you don't have and don't need. But that's just the surface. The next truth reveals what wealth really looks like when you know where to find it. Lesson 2. Wealth is what you don't see. The second psychological truth that keeps people broke is confusing spending money with having money. Here's the illusion that destroys wealth. When you see someone in a Ferrari, you might think, wow, they must be rich. But all you really know is they spent a lot of money. As Morgan Housel says, wealth isn't the car, it's the cash you didn't spend to buy the car. True wealth is invisible, and that's why most people never build it. In the flourishing agricultural district where master gardeners competed to demonstrate their horticultural expertise, there lived two equally skilled cultivators who approached their craft with completely different philosophies about what constituted true gardening success. Both gardeners possessed identical plots of fertile land, access to the same quality seeds, and years of experience, yet their approaches to displaying their achievements would create dramatically different long-term outcomes. The first gardener, known as the spectacular display master, believed that gardening excellence should be immediately visible to anyone who visited his property. Every growing season, he would invest enormous amounts of time, energy, and resources into creating the most impressive surface displays possible. His garden featured elaborate flower arrangements, exotic blooms, perfectly manicured pathways, and decorative elements that commanded admiration from every visitor. The spectacular display master took great pride in the constant stream of compliments and recognition his garden generated. Neighbors would point to his colorful flower beds as evidence of his superior gardening skills, and he enjoyed hosting tours where people could appreciate his artistic vision and impressive achievements. His garden became a local attraction that drew visitors from neighboring districts. However, the spectacular display master's focus on creating impressive visual displays meant that he allocated most of his resources toward temporary beauty rather than sustainable systems. His exotic flowers required constant replacement, his elaborate arrangements demanded continuous maintenance, and his decorative elements consumed funds that could have been invested in soil improvement or seed collection. The second gardener, called the root system builder, took a completely different approach that initially seemed almost boring to outside observers. Instead of focusing on spectacular surface displays, he quietly invested his time and resources in developing robust underground root systems, building comprehensive seed collections, and creating sustainable growing infrastructure that would generate abundance for decades. The root system builder's garden appeared modest compared to his neighbor's impressive displays, but beneath the surface, something extraordinary was happening. His careful investment in soil health, root development, and seed preservation was creating a foundation for exponential growth that would far exceed anything possible through surface-level beautification. While visitors admired the spectacular display master's colorful flowers, they rarely noticed the root system builder's unremarkable but powerful underground systems. However, years later, when challenging growing seasons tested both gardens, the contrast became undeniable. The spectacular display master's beautiful but shallow displays withered quickly, while the root system builder's deep foundations produced abundant harvests that sustained his family and community. Here's what that story reveals about wealth building. Nearly 70% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck, even many earning six figures, because they confuse high income with wealth. Real wealth is what you save and invest, invisible to the outside world. It's not about how much you make, it's about how much you keep. Wait, this principle unlocks the real purpose of wealth building that most people completely miss. Lesson 3. Saving equals control over time. The third psychological truth reveals the ultimate purpose of money that most people never discover. Saving equals control over your time. The highest form of wealth isn't luxury cars or mansions. It's the power to say, I don't want to work this weekend, or I want to take a month off and travel. As Morgan Housel writes, the ability to do what you want, when you want, with who you want, for as long as you want, is the highest dividend money pays. In the bustling trading empire where merchants traveled endless routes seeking profitable opportunities, there lived a successful trader who began to understand something profound about the relationship between accumulated resources and personal freedom. This merchant, known as the Wise Freedom Builder, had spent years building his trading business and earning substantial profits, but he gradually realized that wealth without autonomy was merely another form of servitude. Early in his career, the Wise Freedom Builder had operated like most merchants in the empire, earning money during profitable seasons, spending it on lifestyle improvements and business expansion, then repeating the cycle endlessly. While this approach generated steady income, it also created a trap where he remained completely dependent on continuous trading activity to maintain his standard of living. The turning point came when the Wise Freedom Builder witnessed other merchants facing crises during economic downturns. Traders who had seemed prosperous were suddenly forced to accept unfavorable deals, work exhausting schedules, and compromise their values simply because they had no financial reserves to weather difficult periods. Their lack of accumulated resources had eliminated their ability to make choices based on wisdom rather than desperation. This observation inspired the Wise Freedom Builder to fundamentally restructure his approach to wealth accumulation. Instead of spending every profit on immediate pleasures or business expansion, he began systematically setting aside a portion of his earnings into what he called his Freedom Fund. Resources that existed solely to provide him with options and independence. The Wise Freedom Builder's Freedom Fund grew slowly but steadily, and with each passing season, something remarkable began happening to his decision-making process. When presented with trading opportunities, he no longer had to evaluate them purely based on immediate financial necessity. Instead, he could consider whether these opportunities aligned with his values, interests, and long-term goals. As his Freedom Fund expanded, the Wise Freedom Builder discovered that he could afford to be selective about trading partners, choose routes that interested him rather than only the most profitable ones, and even take extended breaks from trading when he wanted to spend time with family or pursue other interests. His accumulated resources had transformed from mere money into something far more valuable: the power to shape his life according to his own preferences rather than external pressures. Other merchants began noticing that the Wise Freedom Builder seemed remarkably calm and content compared to his peers. While they remained trapped in cycles of financial stress and forced decision-making, he possessed an inner peace that came from knowing his time belonged to him, not to circumstances beyond his control. Here's what that story reveals about money psychology. Even a 3 to 6 month emergency fund gives you options and space. It means a layoff doesn't break you, a bad boss doesn't own you, and your time isn't controlled by fear. You're making decisions from freedom, not desperation. This next lesson challenges everything society teaches about success and survival. Lesson 4. Getting rich versus staying rich. The fourth psychological truth challenges everything society teaches about success. Getting rich and staying rich are two completely different games requiring opposite skills. Everyone wants to know, how do I get rich? Start a business, buy crypto early, take bold risks. But nobody asks, how do I stay rich? Getting rich often requires big bets, optimism, and risk tolerance. But staying rich requires discipline, caution, and deep respect for the downside. In the age of great exploration, where adventurers sought to expand territorial boundaries and discover new sources of wealth, there lived two equally capable leaders whose completely different approaches to conquest and consolidation would determine not only their immediate success, but their lasting legacy. Both possessed exceptional skills, loyal followers, and access to substantial resources. Yet their philosophies about expansion versus preservation would create dramatically different outcomes. The first leader, known as the Bold Territory Conqueror, believed that greatness came through continuous expansion and aggressive acquisition of new lands. The Bold Territory Conqueror would lead daring expeditions into uncharted territories, launching ambitious campaigns to capture valuable resources and establish dominance over rival groups. His strategy focused on maximizing territorial gains through calculated risks and bold maneuvers that often yielded spectacular results. The Bold Territory Conqueror's approach generated remarkable short-term success. His expeditions acquired vast amounts of gold, precious materials, and fertile land that made his empire appear incredibly prosperous. His followers admired his courage and vision, and neighboring territories viewed his expanding domain with a mixture of fear and respect. The Bold Territory Conqueror took pride in his growing reputation as a leader who could achieve the impossible through audacious action. However, the Bold Territory Conqueror's expansion-focused strategy contained a fatal flaw. Every new conquest required defending existing territories while simultaneously funding new expeditions. His resources became spread increasingly thin across vast distances, making his empire vulnerable to coordinated attacks or internal rebellions. When multiple challenges arose simultaneously, his aggressive expansion strategy collapsed because he had prioritized growth over sustainable defense. The second leader, called the Wise Fortress Protector, took a fundamentally different approach that initially seemed less impressive but proved far more enduring. After achieving initial territorial gains through strategic expansion, the Wise Fortress Protector shifted his focus from conquest to consolidation, building robust defensive systems and sustainable resource management practices. The Wise Fortress Protector understood that maintaining existing wealth required different skills than acquiring it. He invested heavily in fortifications, established reliable supply chains, developed diplomatic relationships with neighbors, and created redundant systems that could survive various types of attacks. His approach seemed boring compared to the Bold Territory Conqueror's exciting expeditions, but it created lasting security. Years later, when economic challenges and military pressures tested both empires, the contrast became undeniable. The Bold Territory Conqueror's overextended domain collapsed rapidly when he could no longer fund his aggressive expansion strategy, while the Wise Fortress Protector's well-defended territory weathered multiple crises and continued thriving for generations. Here's what that story reveals about wealth psychology. Mike Tyson earned over $400 million but ended up $23 million in debt. Sam Bankman-Fried built a $26 billion empire and lost it all by continuing to gamble. Warren Buffett didn't make flashy bets, he just did the boring right thing for 70 years. As he says, the first rule of compounding is to never interrupt it unnecessarily. All of the above becomes meaningless if you don't understand these invisible forces that control more than we want to admit. Lesson 5. Luck and risk rule more than we admit. The fifth and most humbling psychological truth is that you're not fully in control of your financial destiny. Yes, hard work matters, but so does timing, environment, and pure chance. This isn't about being pessimistic, it's about building systems that survive what you can't predict. As Morgan Housel puts it, success is never as good as it seems, failure is never as bad. Luck and risk are siblings. And understanding this changes everything about how you approach money. In the cosmic realm where mortal affairs were influenced by forces beyond human understanding, there existed two powerful entities known as the twin celestial siblings who held dominion over all earthly endeavors. These mysterious forces, called fortune and misfortune, were inseparable companions who moved through the world together, touching every life with their unpredictable influence. Yet mortals rarely recognized their presence until their effects became undeniable. Fortune was the generous sibling who bestowed unexpected advantages, favorable timing, and serendipitous opportunities upon those who crossed her path. She might grant a merchant favorable weather for crucial trading voyages, provide a scholar access to rare knowledge at precisely the right moment, or arrange for ambitious entrepreneurs to encounter influential mentors who could change their destinies forever. Meanwhile, misfortune was the harsh sibling who brought unexpected challenges, devastating setbacks, and tragic circumstances that could destroy years of careful planning in moments. He might strike down promising young leaders with sudden illness, create economic disasters that wiped out prosperous businesses, or arrange fatal accidents that prevented talented individuals from fulfilling their potential. The twin celestial siblings operated according to mysterious laws that mortals could never fully comprehend or predict. They showed no favoritism based on intelligence, virtue, or hard work. The wisest scholars and the most dedicated workers were equally susceptible to their influence as the lazy and foolish. Their interventions could elevate humble peasants to positions of great power, or reduce mighty kings to poverty and desperation. What made the twin celestial siblings particularly challenging for mortals to understand was their tendency to work in tandem, often visiting the same individuals multiple times throughout their lives. A merchant who experienced fortune's blessing through discovering a profitable trade route might later encounter misfortune's intervention through political upheaval that destroyed his business. Conversely, someone who suffered misfortune's setbacks early in life might later receive fortune's unexpected gifts. The wisest mortals learned to recognize the twin celestial siblings' influence and adapted their strategies accordingly. Instead of attributing all success to their own brilliance or all failure to their own inadequacy, these individuals built resilient systems designed to benefit from fortune's gifts while surviving misfortune's attacks. They remained humble during prosperous times and maintained hope during difficult periods, understanding that both conditions were temporary. Here's what that story reveals about financial success. Bill Gates was brilliant, but he also attended one of the only high schools in America with a computer in 1968. His equally gifted friend Kent Evans had the same dreams and potential, but died young in a tragic accident. Jesse Livermore was one of history's greatest traders who made millions betting against the 1929 crash, yet died broke because he couldn't survive the risks that followed. The lesson isn't to give up trying, it's to build systems that survive uncertainty and stay in the game long enough for the odds to swing back in your favor. Now let's bring all these psychological truths together. There you have it. 5 psychological truths that separate those who build lasting wealth from those who stay broke forever. Recognizing the trap of never enough and defining your own finish line. Understanding that real wealth is invisible and built through what you don't spend. Using money to buy back control over your time rather than impressive possessions. Mastering both the aggressive game of getting rich and the defensive game of staying rich, and accepting that luck and risk rule more than we want to admit, while building systems that survive uncertainty. Here's the empowering truth. The psychology of money isn't just about dollars and cents. It's about decisions, discipline, and how you define a good life. Success with money is not a science. It's a behavior that anyone can learn, regardless of intelligence or background. Your challenge starting today. Ask yourself, am I chasing more, or am I building a life that actually feels rich? Which lesson resonated most with you and why? Comment below with your biggest takeaway, and if this completely changed how you think about money psychology, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss future videos that turn financial awareness into wealth-building behavior. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, you don't win the money game by out-earning everyone. You win by designing a life that's truly yours.